me for very long. So yeah, my name is Eamon Barrett, and along with my colleague David, who's standing beside me here, we've been running Altitude for 32 years. Dave is a bit younger than me. He started when he was 15 and he's still stuck here. But he's our workshop manager and he's our chief bike mechanic. There's very, very little about bikes that he does not know. And Dave is going to do the course this evening. I'd like to thank the Waterford Partnership for giving us the opportunity to host this event. As a business, we are always happy to share knowledge about cycling, anything that helps you to enjoy your bike more, make you feel more comfortable on your bike, or help you use your bike more is what we're here for. So Dave has got a good kind of agenda of stuff to run through. He's going to be highlighting the particular tools and bits that came in your pack to show you how to use those properly. And as Peter said, please, 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 there is no such thing as a silly question. We all started from the point of zero knowledge, and we are here to help you. Whatever you need to ask, please feel free to do it. So I hope you enjoy the evening. Thank you again to Peter for facilitating it. I'll hand you over to Dave, and he's going to crack straight into it. Thank you.
Okay, so we're going to go through each of the items you got in the pack, but we're not going to overcomplicate things. Keep everything nice and simple, that we all can learn something from this evening. So the first thing I'm going to do is the mini pump that you have. The mini pump is set up that I can take two types of valves. So there is the two types of valve on the market. There's the Presta valve, which is the narrow valve, and there is the Schrader valve, the wider one, the same as what's on a car. So the pump that you've gotten can be reversed to suit whichever type of valve that you have on your bike at the moment. And I'll show you how to reverse that now. So if you have your little pump, you just unthread the top section, turn the pump upside down, and that little plastic guy, you can see it, there we go. That little guy pops out. So at the moment, it's hollow on the inside, so it's set up for the Presta valve, which is the narrow valve. So if I want to set that up for the car side valve, I just pull the two pieces apart, reverse both, and put them back together again. And now it's set up for the Schrader valve. You'll see a little cross section on the inside, and I just pop that in back into the pump, tighten it back on, and you're now set up for the car type Schrader valve. Is that okay? So the next thing we'll do, we'll show you how to take off the front wheel off of a bike. I just used a bike here with a quick release system. If you have your own type of bike that's different, you can let me know and we can go through that a little bit later. So with this style of bike, the first thing we do is we want to release the brake system. So I'm going to squeeze the two pieces of brake together, and this little V-brake system here just lifts up, and the two brake pads come apart. And that just means it makes it easier for me now to drop the wheel out of the frame. So I can just open this lever. Can you see that? If I open this lever, I've got to unscrew the opposite side 4 or 5 turns, and the wheel just drops straight off. So what I've done there is I've opened the lever, and then I've unthreaded this little guy 4 or 5 turns just to drop the wheel through the frame. And I'll show you how to put it back on in 2 minutes. So we're going to presume that we've got a flat tire now. So I'll just deflate this. So there's that key. Not the sound that you like to hear, but now we're going to get our 2 plastic tire levers. So with our tire now being flat, the first thing you do with a flat tire is you go around the tire and you push it inwards with your thumbs in away from the rim. And that just breaks the seal that the tire might have against the rim in case the tire wasn't removed in a long time. So go around the whole rim, pushing the tire away from the rim. and turn it over and do the same with the other side. So nearly broken any little bonds that the tire might have against the side of the rim or inside of the rim. Now we move maybe 2 or 3 spoke lengths away from the valve, get one of the plastic tire levers and get that in under the tire, like that. So he's hooked in there now under the tire. The trick now is not to move too far away with the next tire lever. Only move away the width of maybe 1 or 2 spokes, that's all, and get the second lever in underneath and it lifts off that little bit easier. If you try to do that with the tire lever off over here, you're fighting against the whole pressure on the tire and you're never going to get it off. So the trick is when one lever is in place, move along 1, 2 spoke distances, second lever in, and it pops off so much easier. And then we just move along again, another two spoke lengths in underneath again, and it's off again. And at that point, then you release the pressure that the rest could even come off with your thumbs. I can release that now, and it comes off all the way around. When you're taking off the tire, you've only got to take it off, or removing a tube or looking for a puncture. You're only taking the tire off on one side. No need to take off the second side, only a beading on one side. Next thing to do is just take the tube out. Now, a little trick here would be not to remove the valve from the rim. I would pump the tube up a little bit, see is there a hole that you can hear visibly. If there is, you can pinpoint where that hole is from seeing it, but then also you can actually bring the tube back up to that point of the tire and match to where there might be a piece of torn or glass in the tire. So straight away you're seeing where the hole is, and now I can see, well, I got an issue, and I can go straight to that part of the tire just to see if there anything in there that's causing a problem. So that's just allowing you to pinpoint the tire or pinpoint the puncture a little bit quicker. As we're going to take this out now to fix the puncture, we'll take the tube out completely. So just pull back the tire and lift the valve out. So we'll just put 2 or 3 little pumps of air into this tube now. To give it a little bit of shape and also to see then is there a puncture. Now this is a brand new tube, so it's not punctured. But if it was, the next thing we go for is our little patch kit that's in your maintenance kit, or maintenance bag. So, so you have your little bit of sandpaper. So once you pinpoint the tube, pinpoint the hole, which sometimes will require putting the tube the old-fashioned way through the basin of water to find the little pinhole. Once you've found that, you can mark it with a piece of pen or crayon, whatever suits, and then a little bit of sandpaper that comes in the kit, and just rough it up, only a little bit. And then these new sealant patches don't require glue. They're a more modern way of doing things. You just peel the patch off, as if it's a plaster. Just peel it off, put that straight onto the tube, over the hole, and all it requires then is a couple of minutes of pressure. Just put your thumb on it for a few minutes, and that will actually create a complete airtight seal very, very quickly. So you're not kind of having to put glue on, hope the glue sticks and sets. This is just a far more efficient way of doing it. Now, another kind of little tip would be if you're doing a greenway cycle, or you're going to Tramore or going off for a cycle on the road for a good long spin, it's often best to bring a spare new tube with you on the bike, which means that you can actually, you just don't have to go through this process on the roadside. When you get home, you're a bit more relaxed, and you can do this kind of stuff with the patches in your home surroundings. So on the roadside, take off your tire, take off your tube, check there's nothing in your tire, replace the tube, get back going. Bear in mind, this time of the year, it gets colder. So if you're going to be on the roadside for 20 minutes trying to look for a patch or in glue and getting that all done when it could be on the road within half that time with a new tube fitted. And then when you're at home, it's easier then to just put the patch on. Okay, so let's say that's our patch done. Next thing is now We're going to check the tire in case there's any bit of a torn or glass. Now this is kind of important, but you've got to be careful because you actually got to run your hand inside the tire to check for any kind of a little any sharp object. So what I do here, what I do in the workshop is I'm running my hand through the tire, but I'm also visually looking at the top of the tire as I go. So I'm trying to check, is there any bit of glass ahead of me that I will stop before I see it with my fingers. But you still have to be be careful, be slow, but you must run your hand or fingers inside the tire just to check there's nothing in there before you put the new tube back in, or the fixed tube back in. Nothing worse than fixing a patch, forgetting to take the top, and then you just ruined the tube you've just fixed. You've got to start all over again. So carefully check the tire. That's done. And now we start the process of putting the tube back into the tire. So start at the valve. So just pull back the tire. You know, we're going to work from the side that we've taken off. So we're on the open side now. We've got one side of the tire that's been removed. The other half of the tire is still on the rim. I just peel back the tire that we've opened up, put in the valve first, and close the tire over the top. Now this is always much easier to do with air in the tube. If you ever try to put a flat tube that's been factory packed into a tire, it's very, very difficult because as you flick the tire in over the rim, it's falling out behind you. When you have actually a couple of pumps of air, like that sausage shape, the tube will actually hold itself in the tire much, much easier. So as I feed the tube into the rim, it's staying in as I go. So work away from the valve. That's the tube fed back into the rim. And now I just start back at the valve. And just using your thumbs to begin with, you just bring the tire over the rim and walk away from the valve to the point where you start to feel a little bit of resistance. So you get to a point, probably the width of probably about 4 spokes. And you feel now that last little bit doesn't want to happen. So you got kind of that much of a ridge that feels where the pressure is. So again, get your tire lever. You hold one tire lever, just flick it over like that, just flick it up and hold it in position with one hand. And the second tire lever, again, only a little bit away, again, the width of the spoke or two, get underneath and flick him back in. And again, small distance between it, 1 spoke length, maybe 2, and flick it back in. If you have 1 spoke, if you've got 1 tire lever over here, the second one is 6 spokes away, you're really getting nowhere. You're just too much pressure and you're never going to get the tire back over the rim. So just small distances, 1 spoke, 2 spokes, and flick it over, move along a little bit, flick it over again, and you just get it back in. And the last little bit sometimes you have to do with your thumbs. Is that okay? Everyone okay with that? Yeah. Yeah.
David, can I ask just what we've just a question there, just to one person just said to slow down a little bit, but I would say as well that we're recording this, guys, so I will get this sent out to you so you can repeat exactly what David's going through. The Presta valve setup, David, just one of the guys was asking if you could just show us how to set up for the Presta valve and the pump in a minute if it suits you, if that'd be okay.
Yeah, I can go back to that now. Yeah.
Thank you, sir.
So at the moment, I've set that pump up to Schrader valve. Now they actually come in. Yeah, they come in from packaging set up for the Schrader valve, which is the same valve as the car. So what we need to do, open the screw on the top, just turn the pump over, leave that little piece, leave this little piece drop out. And then you're going to take that piece apart. So just pull him apart and reverse both. Reverse him and reverse him. And then put them both back together again. There's actually the instructions are on the top of the pump as well. But just actually reversing both pieces and then just drop it back into the pump. and put the top back on. Is that okay? Yeah.
Perfect. Thanks, David. One other question for us there is just the bottom end of the tire lever. What's that for the part with the hole, please? That'd be great.
Those tire levers, they actually just they click together, and the hole has nothing really. Some people might put a little elastic band through them if they wanted to hang them on a workshop wall, but from what we're doing, there's no actual need or no value to that hole. So it's a hook, a nail in the wall in your workshop wall, and you can hang those tire levers on. It's just a
you could use them as earrings, could you? If you're going out the greenway, just kind of brilliant. That's
like,
it. Yep.
Yes,
perfect. Yeah.
Yes, not your color now, but okay. So back to the wheel, we would pump. We have the tube back in the tire. Next thing we do is we pump this tire up. Now, for this purpose, I'm just going to use our shop floor pump just to make it a little bit quicker. But actually, no. Actually, what I'll do is I'll show you how to use the mini pump. Reverse this now again back to the shredder. Again, take them apart, reverse both, put them back together, and back into the pump. So when you're pumping up a tire, it's always best to have the valve back up at 12 o'clock. Put your pump on. This is easier to do when the actual wheel is on the floor, but I'm going to do it at height so you can see it. Valve up at 12 o'clock, pump at a right angle, and also support the back of the pump with one finger, with a strong finger on the back of the pump. So as I'm pumping, I'm not rocking that pump over and back. And that's what causes the tubes to sometimes split with some customers or some. They pump too aggressively. They're not holding the pump, they're actually holding their hand on the pump and they're pumping over and back really aggressive, and the valve is actually rocking over and back across inside the tire, or sorry, inside the rim, and it causes the tube to split. So valve at 12 o'clock, pump on at a nice right angle to that, support the back of the pump with one hand, and then just pump away. Now bear in mind, these are mini pumps, so the chamber of air is quite small, so you have to prepare the pump for a little bit longer. After a couple of seconds, I will always just stop and just take a look that the tire looks like it's seated correctly all the way around the rim. It's not after rising up anywhere. That's going to cause the tire to lift and have a kind of a jump in it. So that tire looks like it's seated correctly. So now that I'm happy that it's seated, I can move on and pump the rest. If it wasn't seated correctly, I can go to that point and actually use my hands while it's got half pressure to manipulate that tire back into position, push down on it, or I have to lift it up a little bit. So it's at the halfway point, it's a good kind of a time just to check, is the tire seated correctly. So just pump the rest now with this pump. And that's very much it. That is a tire removed, or sorry, the tube removed, patch fitted, and then pumped back up. So I'll just put this now back onto the bike. I don't know if you see, but so as I'm putting the wheel back on, just push it up into the two legs again of the fork. And this is actually probably easier to do with the bike on the floor, and this with me in the stand here. Just push the wheel back up into the frame, hold the left-hand lever, and I tighten the small screw type fella, the nut on the right-hand side. I tighten him until the lever closes with a little bit of resistance. Nothing yet, it's totally loose. So another few turns on this side. I can start to feel now a little bit of resistance. It's probably gone too far now. It doesn't want to close. That lever is too tight. So loosen him off a bit. So this is the adjuster, and this is the lock. And I close him in and now that wheel is locked on. But I don't really, or it's kind of difficult for if you were to close that lever against the frame, it looks neat, but it becomes very difficult to get my fingers in behind to open it. When you get a cold day with cold fingers, that lever is very, very difficult to open. So always try and close the lever. I'll show you now. Backwards, just back behind the fork. So you've got loads of space to get purchase on it, to open it whenever you need to. So just don't close it against the frame like that. You just can't get any kind of a grip to get it back closed in. See if you're like that. It's actually too neat against the fork. So just back behind like that. Is that okay?
Legend. Quick one for you. Just how do people know what spare tube they should get? Obviously, different people have different bikes, etc. So, what's the best advice from there for yourself?
All the tube sizes will be written on the side wall of the tire. So this bike is your traditional hybrid bike. So 700 is the circumference of this wheel. So all hybrid bikes are 700. And then there's different widths of the tube. If you got a cross bike or a bike with chunky tires, you could have a 38C width on the tire. So it's a matter of being written on the side of the tire what size tube you have. Like this one is 700 by 35, and the tube that we have here does 700. See there, 35 up to 44. So the tube can vary. You can have one specific size on a tire, but that tube could fit 5 different tire sizes from 35 up to 44. So the tube hasn't got to be perfect to this. So once it's in the right, once it's in the region, but one tube can be fitted across a number of different tire sizes. And the last thing to check then is that you're getting the right type of valve. See that this is the narrow pressed valve, but this bike is using the Schrader valve. So most tubes have an option of what valve stem matches the wheels that you have. And it is best to try and stay with what the original is, because if you try to put a narrow tube into a rim that's drilled for the wide valve, bit too much room, bit too much play, and that can cause the tube to split. When you pump it, you've got too much room for the valve to move around, and there's potential for the tube to split.
Well, that's great. Thanks, David. I think when I was young, the only thing about Shredder was the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, I think. So one of our questions come in, a bike had an arrow that showed the direction of circulation and the new bike doesn't. Does it matter which way I put the tire back on?
Some tires have a direction arrow, and you might find that some of the threaded grips are pointing forward, and other tire brands have no direction at all. So you can actually put them, it doesn't actually matter. Again, where the size is stamped on the side of the tire, there's often a rotation arrow. So you can actually, before you fit a tire on it, if you did take a wheel off, just check that the rotation arrow is pointing the right direction. Most of the modern tires, the treading is so small and so it's not going to make any massive difference if it's the wrong way. But arrow pointed forward, but it should always be written on the, or sorry, stamped on the side of the tire. Like there will be some tires that have no direction.
Top man, you're flying it, David. Thanks a million.
Okay. So the next thing I'll show you is taking off the back wheel, which is not as complicated as people would think. So again, I'm going to release this brake again. So squeeze the two pieces of brake together to release the little lead pipe. I've released that. The trick to taking off the back wheel is always bring the chain down into the smallest gear. So you're putting the bike effectively into the bike's hardest gear. So change gears now. So you're putting the chain into the smallest cog at the back. And then once I open this lever, like I did on the front, and I just catch the gear changer and pull it back a little bit out of my way, that wheel just drops straight off. And nothing else comes off. The neck, the cable, the chain, all stay in place, and I have the back wheel off. So it isn't as complicated as people think. And putting the back wheel back on, you just put the wheel back up into the frame. One piece of the chain goes under the cog, and the top piece of chain, I'm going to line it back up onto the smallest sprocket. And then once it's on the smallest sprocket, that's my guideline to bring the wheel back up into the frame, to fall back up into the correct position. And that's gone back up there now. And I close the lever, and that's back on. So the back wheel is actually can be taken off as quickly as the front. What I'm not a major fan of is turning the bike upside down to do any work. There's very little maintenance that we do. I've virtually none actually. No maintenance in the workshop done with the bike turned upside down. You mark the saddle, you mark the grips, everything is turned the wrong way around, but you can't actually see anything properly. So anything that we do, bike stays in the upright position. Everything is straight, everything is visible. There's nothing that you can gain from the bike upside down, apart from the serial number, but that's all you need to do with the bike. So again, I'll just do that one more time. The chain onto the smallest gear on the back. It doesn't matter what gear you're in on the front, it's only the back. So smallest on the back, open the lever, pull back the neck a little bit your way, and the wheel will just drop straight down. Straight back off. Okay. Line it back on to the smallest bracket and push it back up into the frame. The lines up into the two frame eyelets, back into position, and close the lever. That part okay? Yeah.
Just been asked there, Dave, could just show how to open and close the brakes again, if possible. That'd be great. Something I struggle with as well with my massive thumbs. So, thank you, sir.
So you probably see it better in the front. So those V brakes are probably the most popular on bikes at the moment. I know there's hydraulic brakes, but the V brakes are probably the most used. So just bring them together. Now, the reason I undone the brakes in the first place is if I didn't open the brakes, there's a good chance the tire wouldn't fit through the brake pad opening. So it's like an easy release system. It leaves the brake pads pop out of your way, the wheel can drop straight out. If I didn't do that, the tire will probably catch on the brakes and start pulling against the brake pads as I try to release it. So put these back together, just bring the two levers, the two cantilevers together. My hands are blocking it, sorry. And this little lead pipe goes into an open little hole on the caliper. Pop them in, and they just actually flick back into place. Not lined up there, but that's how they work. So they open them, put it in the back, hold the two of them together. Keep blocking on the fingers. Pull this little lead pipe out of the way, up through the split in the brake piece, and they just spring back out of your way. And then bring them together. Hook in that little U-type guy. These hooked back into position, and then the brakes are back working again. Now, actually, the brakes is probably the next thing that I'm going to move on to as well. Anyhow, actually, I do next just on my list. I just go to the chain lubrication, and I come back to the brakes. I'm going to go through the use of the Allen key in a few minutes as well. So let's just go to the chain lubrication next. So the mistake a lot of people make with oil, if they actually put way too much on. They feel a noise from the bike, put the oil on. They hear another noise, put more oil on. So as you put more and more oil onto the chain, all it does, it becomes a gathering point for dirt off the road to stick to the chain, and you get this really heavy black gungy mess on the chain. And all it actually does is make the gears less efficient. But you got dirt mixed with oil, then you go put up more oil on top, you got dirt on top of oil, it just becomes an ongoing rolling mess. So the easiest way to oil the chain, and the most kind of effective way that's not getting oil all over the whole bike, is just to oil down at the bottom. Lift up a little bit. Just to oil the bottom jockey wheel on the rear mech as you're pedaling backwards. So as I pedal backwards, I'm only putting oil onto the chain on that bottom jockey wheel. And I pedal backwards 4 or 5 times, which is enough to give the chain a nice coating of oil. And that's it. And that just does away with the need for oil to go across the top of the sprockets, which just becomes a gathering point for dirt. There's no need for lubrication, but they're in solid teeth. They don't need any lubrication. All that needs lubrication is the actual chain itself. So forget having to put oil across the top of the bike, just bottom jockey wheel, pedal backwards 3 or 4 times or 4 or 5 times, depending on how much oil the bike needs. And the trick is to oil the bike every 3 weeks, as opposed to putting on 3 months supply in one go. Small amounts regular is far more efficient than putting on too much, which then becomes a gathering point for dirt. Is that okay?
I have 2 questions for you. Firstly, do we only oil the outside of the chain? And the second question we had previously, which is a fantastic question, is there any other part of the bike that we need to oil?
Good question. There's about 5 major parts to the bike, 5 important parts of any bike. The internals of the wheels, where the bearings are, where the axle is. So these 2 axle points are packed with grease from manufacture. The steering bearings are packed with grease from manufacture, and the bearings into the center, to where the pedal system is, into the frame, are packed with grease from manufacture. So those 4 areas don't need any oil for at least 2-3 years. If you put oil in any of those areas, or which we'll get to in a little while, you point the power washer at any of those areas, you're actually dispersing the factory greases, they're diluting the factory greases, they run out, and then you're left with bearings running on very little, if any, lubrication, and you get premature wear on all the parts. So the center of the bike inside the frame is packed with grease, the 2 wheels are packed with grease, and so is the steering bearings. It's only if a bike gets old, 5 years old, and they start to feel a bit noisy or they're a bit loose, then they need attention. But from normal maintenance, if they're not causing any problems, there are areas of the bike you don't have to oil at all. Oil will just act like a dilution to grease, and then you with the grease, then if it's more of a runny consistency, it just over a wet spins, just gets run out of the bike and left them with very little lubrication in there. So grease and the thick heavy material, the oil just dilutes it too much, and then you end up with very little in there. So oil, which you have in the kit, is for the chain. And the only other thing that you might need to maintain, if you had an old bike that was in the shed for a few months, you might have little areas of the bike, like the spring on the brake, or the spring on the gear changer, that get a bit sticky from just not being used. Then you might use something a little bit lighter, something like a TF2 spray, or even, I could say, WD-40. You don't want to use WD-40 or this kind of stuff on the chain. It will work, but it's so lightweight, it gets washed off within one wet spin. And then you're left with no protection on the chain. These are the chain oil, it's actually giving the chain some protection. These guys, and spray cans, don't give any protection to the chain. So they're on for a couple of spins, a wet spin or 2, they get washed off, and then you're left with very little. So this kind of a spray on some of the spring points, the spring on the front derailleur system, the spring maybe on the back, the spring on the brake parts, but that's really all. Maybe a little bit onto a cable, if there's a little bit of rust coming up onto a cable, and just give it a little bit of a spray up inside the cable like that. Again, just for a little bit of maintenance. It's bike wasn't used in a long time, but that's probably all you need to kind of the spray can for.
And just a quick one for you, David. So do you oil only the outside of the chain?
I'm oiling the top. I'm on the top. I'm actually pointing this kind of can down on the top. All the pivot points are actually being lubricated as I point this downwards. So I'm kind of pointing at the side, but actually it's actually the nib of this is actually pointing right down on top of the chain. So all the rollers inside the chain, all the rollers that you can see are all being oiled by just doing it this way. Then backwards and straight down onto the bottom dock you will on the top of the chain.
And my 412th question for you: do we wash the bike? Do we wash the chain before we oil it? Is that a good idea or a bad idea? Obviously, there's a lot of debris in there, but if it's kind of fairly clean, what's your thought process?
Yeah, if the chain has too much oil, as in a good heavy buildup of oil, there's another product which is like a citrus degreaser. So that's kind of a spray that you would spray onto the chain, and it just breaks down all that heavy road dirt. And then all you need after that then is probably a tea towel, an old tea towel that you just grab the chain, run it through your hand, and most of that heavy dirt will get taken off. So that's only if a bike came in with a couple of years worth of oil and lots of dirt and soil, just heavy dirt. If there was too much oil, you'd never get it off through washing it. You'd have to use one of those degreaser sprays first. And the chain that's going to clean will run a lot smoother, and it won't wear half as fast as a dirty chain. If you've got a dirty chain that's picked up lots of debris, it's rolling over the sprockets, but it's got debris and dirt and grit, and that doesn't mean that becomes a wear point, and you just wear things out a lot faster if they're dirty. So a clean chain running on a clean sprocket is a lot smoother. Gears sound nicer. There's no sound of the bike, and the wear time is much better. You get a lot longer from your parts.
Perfect. And I've got one question which I think you're going to answer every day to is how often should you service your bike?
Once a year is what we would call a safety service. But it depends on how much you use the bike. We have some customers and they would do 12,000 kilometers a year. And we have other customers who are sporadic users, on the greenway to Tramore and back. So there's big differences in the kind of bike riders that are out there at the moment. So from just a general perspective, a general kind of point, one safety check per year. The special tools you can use to check whether the chain has been stretched, to check that the chain is not going to, is not worn on you. We would also check things like cuts on tires, check brake pad wear. So just give a little safety check to the bike that things that you may not pick up on that we probably would. So once a year is probably a safe one. If you're doing tons of miles, a bit more often, but once a year is a kind of a good safety check.
So very similar to a car then, really. So depending on how heavy you are as a user on your bike, then that's what you should really do.
And then some people have kind of a higher level of maintenance than others. Some guys like to do some home mechanics and they'll enjoy putting brake pads on, putting tires on. They enjoy that. Others just don't, and they just hand it in and they must do it for them. So it's totally up to how confident you are with your own bike. But even the stuff this evening, like replacing a tube, oiling the chain, that's what we know. I think it's just small, simple procedures that shouldn't be too difficult, too complicated to use. So yeah, I think we've actually gone through now the chain lubrication part. And I said the one thing I wouldn't use is WD-40. I said it's too light, too easy to get washed off. You put it on, after 2 days later, one wet spin, it's back to zero, and your chain is back being dry again. So that WD-40, one of those penetrative things, is good for a lock, a seized gate, or a seized something, but it's not very good as a protection. It's only just there to unseize something that's seized up or stiff. The thing I haven't mentioned yet, I don't know if anybody got disc brakes on their bikes. It's quite new to the market, but if you have got disc brakes, it's very important if you're oiling your bike not to get any oils at all onto the disc rotors. Now let me show you. I'll bring the bike in front of the screen here for you. So this is a bike with the disc system. So it's actually a hydraulic brake system, and the two brake pads grab onto this rotor that's part of the wheel. But this system works very well, super strong, but it does not like to have any oil on the rotor at all. If oil gets on the rotor, the brake pads get contaminated from that oil and get squeaky, noisy brakes. So if you're oiling the chain on these kind of bikes, you've got to be a bit more careful, not put too much on, and at times even cover the rotor with a cloth, so there's no oil being sprayed onto the rotor. So in case anyone there has disc brakes on their bike, just be cautious about the way they oil it, not to get anything onto these. And also these disc rotors, they actually don't even want to be cleaned. They don't need any sprays, any polishes. They're quite happily work just left alone, and that'll do away with any problems with noisy brakes and squeaky brakes. Is that okay? So bike washing is the next one, and this is quite straightforward. Really, the old-fashioned basin or bucket of warm sudsy water, it can go anywhere because it's not going to harm anything. So the greases that we mentioned earlier in the steering and in the center and the hubs is not affected by the warm basin of sudsy water. And you can use a light bristle brush, like you get a brush and scoop set, with light bristles, nothing too stiff, or it'll just tarnish the lacquer on the paintwork. So very soft bristle brush, basin of sudsy water, and really clean anything you want across the whole bike. And when it comes to washing it off, garden hose, maybe on sprinkler setting, nothing stronger than that. You don't want to have any jets of power jets or harsh jets of water being pointed at the bike, but that's what will do the damage to the bearing points. They're spraying water at bearing points that are packed with grease, and that's what causes the greases to disperse. So garden hose after the basin salty water. And washing the bike is actually a nice way to keep a look or keep an eye on the maintenance of the bike. You might be washing your bike, you might spot, oh, I've seen a cut on my tire. I didn't know it was there. So by washing the bike, it keeps you up to date with the condition that your bike is in. You're not just washing it, but as you're washing, you're paying attention to a cut on the tire or, oh, I've seen a frayed cable. So it's a good way to keep ahead of the safety side of the bike as well. And again, keep the bike upright. Don't turn the bike upside down to wash it. Leave the bike in that upright position. And a good spray of water finished across the whole bike. And that's that side of it covered. Is that okay? Yeah.
One question for you there, Dave.
Yeah.
Well, I have three questions, sorry. So spokes, so maintenance of spokes, obviously if they're bent or anything else on that, is there anything we need to do regarding spokes on bikes? Buckled?
Yes, wheels can get buckled. Normally it would be the case of hitting something or something hitting you that would cause the wheel to fall out of shape. Each spoke on a wheel has a job to do. So each spoke has a little job in the way of keeping that wheel straight. So if one spoke was broken, that spoke that is not doing its job to hold tension in that part of the rim. So the wheel will then lose shape and you've got a buckle in the wheel. So a buckle is caused either by a proper impact or if you break a spoke, the wheel then has got no tension in that part of the rim and the wheel will fall out of shape. So by replacing that spoke, you're pulling the wheel back straight again. But there's kind of a bit of knowledge needed to balance up the correct torques and tensionings on a spoke. It's something that they learn over years, but it wouldn't be something that the regular home mechanic would want to do. And different types of wheels have different levels of tension, and you get a feel for it through experience. So as a rule, most people wouldn't do much with spokes at home in their own house. They leave that for us.
Yeah, for you, absolutely. Quick one as well. One of the participants here, their bike makes when they're going over bumpy ground, it makes a rattle. Fine on the flat. Look to see if there's anything loose. Can't find anything. Any ideas what could be making a noise on a bike if it's going over, well, like the Tour de France and the cobbles? What's the best thing to do?
Yes, I probably could help you with that. Okay. It is most likely the steering bearings on the front of the bike. Can you see that? Can you see the front of the bike now? No.
Just about if you lift it up a small amount, that would be perfect. Brilliant. That's great. Thanks.
Okay, so for this, we'll use the Allen key set that we have in the kit. So I'll just kind of imitate that looseness. I'm going to loosen up something here, just the two side bolts on the side of the stem. And one top bolt, like 2 or 3 turns. And then if I just pull my front brake now, I've got a rocking and a vibration in that fork. So it's probably come from the steering bearings being a little loose. And that's common. They just vibrate loose over time, but they can be just given a tighten. Or the bike is old and the bearings are worn and they need a bit more attention. But more often than not, a bit of adjustment on the top screw here will help to close down those bearings and stop that looseness. Again, it's something that there's a balance there. You over tighten that cap, you squeeze the bearings too much, and they'll wear out quite quickly. So it's a bit like the spoke tensioning. There's a little bit of a fine balance between getting it right. So, but the issue, more than likely, that's all it is, a little bit of tension or adjustment needed on the front of the bike, which we would happily do.
Perfect. Thanks for that, sir. Washing an e-bike. So I assume, obviously, don't wash the electric point. Can you just wash an e-bike the same as a normal bike?
Yes, you could. And I'd probably leave the battery intact. Leave the battery on the bike, because the battery, when it's on, is going to close in over all the electric points. You take the battery off, you're exposing all the electrics. So they will leave the battery on and wash it as normal. But again, be careful without no spray washers or nothing like that, or no power. And even just be gentle, just sprinkler on the garden hose, just to get the few last bit of suds off. But yeah, leave the battery on.
Perfect. Good tip. The final one is a bit like bikes. You know, if we're going on holiday for a few months and we leave our car at home, same thing with our bike when we go for our winter storage. What's our best way of storing our bike over the winter? And if it's left alone for a while, what do we need to do before we start riding it again?
The main thing to do is keep a track of tire pressure. We see lots of bikes that come in here, and it could take maybe over a year of non-use. But if there's no pressure in the tires from sitting with the weight of the bike on the tires and no air in the tires crack, and you end up having to put new tires on. If those tires had kept a bit of air in them, they would be ready to use again. So, and also another tip would be people come back from a wet spin and put the bike in the shed or put the bike in the garage, and the weather is poor for the following couple of weeks or whatever, or the next chance to get to ride the bike is a few weeks later. If they haven't put any lubrication on the chain after the wet spin, the bike just sits in their shed or garage with no lubrication on the chain, and then the chain will actually start to rust, and they get a fright thinking, wow, my chain is rusted, it's only a new bike. But if it's put in the shed after the wet spin with no lubrication on it, and then you go back to it, like I said, 3 weeks later, it will be rusted. So after the wet spin, I know you're probably wanting to get in, get a shower, get changed, but go back out to the bike, just 2 minutes, and put a bit of lubrication back over the chain before you pull it away completely. So yeah, lubrication on the chain, if it's been put away for winter, long term, and once or twice over the winter, go out and just give it a pump of air. Any regular bike will lose pressure over about 3 weeks. And over the winter, it'll lose pressure, it'll lose a lot of pressure over the winter. So a pump of air once or twice over that time will be worth it.
Is it better to maybe hang your bike rather than let it sit on the floor, just to avoid tire cracks if you can?
Yes. Yeah, hanging will be better. Yeah, not possible for everybody, but hanging it is better. Yeah, having it up off the floor is better. Yeah. I think I missed over one point earlier, which was tire pressure. And a quick guide for tire pressure is you shouldn't be able to push your thumb down into the top of the tire. If you can sink your thumb into a tire, it needs to be given a top bucket pressure. And the advantages are a hard tire pumped correctly won't puncture as easy, and a tire pumped correctly will be more efficient to roll. You won't have that sag effect where the tire is stuck to the road and you're working really hard to pedal. So a hard tire will roll more efficiently and less chance of picking up a thorn or a piece of glass. So, and again, every 3 weeks, you could just check that little thumb check. Can your thumb be pressed down into the top of the tire? And if it does sink into the tire, you need to top top it back up. There's kind of 3 rules with tire pressures on bikes. A regular kids bike or a mountain bike is about 40 psi, a hybrid closer to 60 psi, and a race bike heading towards 90 psi. Just the 3 different tire levels for the 3 different types of wheels.
I thought we were talking about Magnum then for a minute, but you said PSI.
Yes,
but
okay.
no, yeah, that's a
count per square inch. Count per square inch. Yeah, but the thumb check is probably the easiest to do.
And that's a really handy tip, just something that everybody can do, just figure out on a bike. Because obviously, if your tire pressures are there, then
on the top, you'll always squeeze the sides. So thumb down onto the top is the real test. Can you sink your thumb down into the tire?
Cool. And I've a question in here. So one of the guys said that there's 2 bikes and they have 2 different valves. The narrow one is on their bike and they're struggling to pump the tires. So is there any tips at all on that?
The narrow valve, in theory, it actually takes air easier than the Presta. Or sorry, the narrow valve is the Presta, and it takes air easier than the Schrader. Most race bikes that take high pressures are using the Presta. I'll just open this up now and show you. So if you wanted to pump this tire or this tube, remove the little plastic cover. You got this little nip on the end. You see it there? You've actually got to unthread him. Now he can't fall off. So once I've unthreaded him, that valve is now open. That would take air. But if I didn't unthread him, that valve is actually sealed. You can pump all you want, nothing's going to go in. So unthread that valve. And then back to what we said earlier, you put the pump on, especially with a narrow valve like this, you cannot rock the pump over and back because this little guy is so delicate, he could easily get snapped off. So that's where you have to, like we said earlier, put the pump, get the valve at 12 o'clock, the pump at a right angle, and support the back of the pump with your hand. So you're actually pumping the bike, but the pump is stationary, it's not moving over and back, and that'll protect that kind of valve. If the customer prefers the wide valve, there is adapters you can get that will thread over this to create the wider valve from that valve. So there is an option to do that as well.
2 solutions, Dave. Fair play to you. Well done. Just another question coming in here. Do you need to also loosen the screw near the tube on the Presta valve?
Just say that again to me.
So to loosen the screw nearer the tube on the Presta valve.
This one?
Yeah.
Oh yeah. All that, if I was putting this tube into a bike, I'm going to take this off, put the tube down through the rim, and then this little threaded washer just closes back up on the outside, again to stop the valve rotating anywhere. So it's like some tubes have it, other tubes don't, but just close him on the outside. So the tube is in and he is on the outside, resting up against underneath the rim, just to stop the valve from rocking around. So it's like an extra safety thing that stops you kind of having the ability to move the valve as you're pumping it. But having the correct positioning with your hand at 12 o'clock is actually a better way to do it.
Perfect. Thanks, Dave.
Yeah, the last thing really is going back to the Allen key set and the pump you got actually has a little ability, or it has the ability to get fixed onto your bike. So the little brackets that's on the side of the pump can actually be fitted. Now, 1 second, let's put this bike back up on the stand so you can see it. So you have your Allen key set. You go to the correct size. This one looks like a size 5. And we open up the little Allen key screw heads in the frame itself. And these are for the bottle cage, but they're also the exact same distance apart to match where the 2 holes are for the bracket on your pump. So the little mini pump you got can actually be fitted to your bike. Now, some bikes have 2 sets of studs, a set on the seat tube bar and a set on the bar in front of you. You can fit the pump to either. Only tip I would have is keep the pump on the side away from the gears, just from safety, in case the pump ever got loose or fell off. It's not going to fall off on the gear side. So as you fit the pump, just keep the pump itself over on the side opposite your gear system. And so the 2 Allen keys are in most bikes, most modern bikes nowadays, and you have your Allen key set, and you have your little bracket on the pump mounted onto your bike. And for emergency out on the road, you have an option to get some air back into your bike. And I think that covered a lot of what I wanted to cover this evening.
No, you've been awesome. Fair play has been great. I've learned a lot myself. So thank you very much.
You can. I seen one question. Can a water bottle be fitted? Yes, you can. The water bottle can be fitted over the bracket for the pump. That's a very normal procedure. They both work hand in hand. Pump on first, rested against the frame, and water bottle cage on top, and they work perfectly well together. None of them get in each other's way. Steady
on there now, David. You're doing 2 things at once. You're just spelling the myth that men can't multitask. Okay, so calm down.
Okay.
So yeah.
That's the water bottle cage, and then this is the pump. So we can actually put pump on first, and bottle cage will go on after. And yeah, there's plenty of space for both to work beside each other.
Brilliant. Look, from our perspective today, it's been brilliant. You've done a superb job, because I think bike maintenance is one of those things that evolves so much over time. So when you've got your little rally grifter, when I was a kid, it's very technical now, but it's the real simple things to make sure that people are safe, happy and healthy getting out on the road. So I think even the thumb test, as you said, is a huge thing. If people can do that before they cycle to make sure that we're safe, that'd be great. Any questions, I suppose, Dave? People can come in and see yourselves in the shop, can't they? There's no problem on that.
Yeah. Another small little tip before we finish is some people actually have bikes with wrong saddle heights. So as a little guide again, if you sit on the saddle of your bike, you should just have the ball of your foot touching the floor. If your saddle is too low, that you sit on the saddle of your bike and your heels are on the floor, you're not getting the correct leg extension, you're not getting the correct efficiency of your pedaling stroke, and you tend to get tired very, very quickly. So sit on the bike, 2 feet to the floor, and just the balls of your foot touching the floor is enough for correct saddle heights. You'll cycle faster, cycle better, and might cycle a little bit more often. Hopefully.
Perfect, you're flying it. You're a gospel of knowledge. Fair play to you. So thank you very much, the 2 of you. You've been great. Anything else you want to say to the audience?
Only that people should feel free to use us as a resource anytime. If you've got a question, we don't mind if you haven't bought the bike here. It doesn't matter to us. All we want you to do is enjoy your cycling. Feel free to come in the door with your bike, or just come in with a question. There's no charge for advice. We're happy to help anybody. There's something that Dave has covered this evening you didn't quite catch, just come in and ask us. We'll do a one-on-one and we'll show you in the shop. It's absolutely no problem.
Eamon, Dave, on behalf of everyone, thank you so much, gentlemen. Here's to a happy and healthy week of cycling. So stay safe, stay happy, stay healthy.
Thank you very much.
Stay safe.
Bye. Bye-bye.